It's episode 85 of the Improv London podcast. I'm your host, Stuart Moses, and this week's guest is Sam Irving.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So, you're best known... What are you best known for in the world of improv?
I'm probably best known for... Spontaneous Sherlock's probably the one we're best known for.
Tell me about...
Yeah, or Men with Coconut. I'll talk about both.
Tell me about both of them.
Yes.
One after the other.
I'll tell you what, I'll tell you about Men with Coconuts first, because I've been doing that for longer. So that's... we are a group based up in Edinburgh. We do short form and long form. We've had various different long form shows across the years. So at the moment what we do is we've got a monthly residency at the Scottish Storytelling Centre called Men with Coconuts and Friends. We'll do 3-4 short form games. We'll have a guest of some description, and then we do a 45-minute improvised musical from an audience title suggestion.
Wow.
Narrative long-form musical improv.
Excellent. All of my favourite things in the same place.
Yes, and all of the things that a lot of people are absolutely terrified of.
Rightly so.
But it works quite nicely. We tend not to get other improv groups. We've had a couple of improv groups, but we'll tend to get poets or stand-ups if they're a bit more unusual and off the wall, rather than just your run-of-the-mill 5-minute set at the stand on a Saturday night. Or we had a guy who did his own one-man improvised ghost stories. That was really good. So we did almost like a choose-your-own-adventure novel. We'd be telling this ghost story set in Edinburgh, and then as he would reach certain climactic points in the story, he'd get people to say, should I go down the alleyway or should I keep going down the road, and things like that. So that's good. So we'll get guests that kind of, we're introducing audiences to a new type of performance, improv audiences, and also maybe there's people coming to see the poets and they're coming away having seen some improv. So that's really good. But we do an improvised James Bond show called Improvised Bond, the most inspired show name. We sat and talked about different ideas for what we should call it and ended up calling it Men with Coconuts Present Improvised Bond, where again we'll do the theme song at the start. We'll improvise that as well. We've got a pianist and a saxophonist to do really sexy undercurrents of music and kind of the stings between different scenes. Lovely. Really nice. We also used to do a show called the Improvised Musical, where we get 3 people out the audience and kind of grill them briefly about their life, and then we do scenes from their life with songs as well, and then get the audience to vote for their favourite one, and then we reprise the big number from whichever their favourite of the 3 were, although remembering the big song from the first one after you've done 2 more musicals between then, not the easiest thing in the world.
If there's one thing that I really wish I could master, it's remembering things when I'm doing improvised musicals.
Yeah, and it doesn't get easier. Sorry to break it to you, but we've been doing it for about 5 years now, and honestly, still we'll have this point where everyone kind of goes very confidently into the chorus and sings 4 completely different lines at the same time. All variations on the same general idea. But yeah, there's always, and then you have to decide, are you singing I or are you singing you, even though you're talking about yourself? Does it, what kind of fits there? Do you try and go for a harmony, but then if everyone tries to go for the harmony, then no one's singing the melody. It's tough, but we've got a really good team of musicians, mostly piano, but then we've also got saxophone and various other instruments for different shows, who are completely able to make us look seamless, even if we completely cock up the chorus.
Then people ask if there's a secret to musical improv, and if there is a secret, it's just having really great musicians.
Oh, absolutely, and they are absolutely as much a part of the show as we are, and we make sure that's the case. They get paid the same amount. If we make money from a gig, the same amount goes to the musician, and the same amount goes to whoever's doing the light and sound. Because we said from day one, you can't do the show with just the people on the stage. And when I do shows without a piano, even if it's not a musical show, we'll have a piano just underscoring everything. Scenic background music, and you really notice it when it's not there. And they can drive the scene as much. If you can yes and the emotion they're giving, and equally there, if you take it down a complete left field turn and it turns out, actually this guy was the villain all along, that's reflected in the music and the audience are like, wow, this looks amazing. So we've got a really good team of musicians. The other nice thing about Men with Coconuts when we're doing musicals is two of the four of us are like professionally trained singers. One went to like choir school right up through musical theatre training. One of them does Rat Pack cover stuff, and as well as various kind of lounge singing type gigs. So these two guys with really strong singing voices, and then myself and Will Nami, who's the fourth performer, not singers.
Right.
I can generally just about hold a tune. Will's an incredible freestyle rapper,
yes.
But I think a lot of the comedy comes from that as well, when you have this beautiful baritone verse from one of either Charlie or Steve, who's a really strong singer, and then it cuts in with one of us going, and we're here too. So that's in Men with Coconuts, which I think, we do improvised pantomime as well occasionally, so we've had all these different formations of show ideas, but we keep coming back to this, just really doing a really solid musical narrative, get the audience to shout out 3 titles, vote for the one they want to see, and then do a half hour to an hour, depending on how long we've got left, of narrative musical. And if you can pull it off, it's so impressive,
What I'd really like to do when improvising a narrative musical is to do the things that musicals do when you bring back elements from previous songs. That's quite hard.
We get, not every show, but we do occasionally have that where you kind of, there's a reference to a song from earlier that weaves back in beautifully, and it looks, and that's when you get people coming off and going, there's no way that wasn't scripted, which, I think you kind of have to take as a compliment. Yes. It's not something I ever, when I started out doing improv, I hated anything singing, musical, but then I realised that I didn't hate musical improv, I hated specifically musical short form games.
Right, okay.
So I really, to this day, I'm not a fan of Do-Ron, I'm not a fan of like Irish Drinking Song, anything like that, because I like the freedom of having no structure, and you're following along the piano, but the piano's following you, whereas if you're doing something where it's that limited, I find it's very, I don't enjoy it nearly as much. But I think that's true of all improv for me. I like more of a free, structureless show, and that's another thing that people will come up to us when we do narrative shows and say, how much of the do you have, like, we have to hit this beat at this point, do you have to have this turning point here? No, generally we'll have maybe the first 2 scenes, we'll say, okay, we'll start with a scene with hero and villain, the second scene will be this, and then we'll see where it goes from there, which ties nicely into Spontaneous Sherlock, which is the other thing that I'm probably most well known for doing, which is, again, it's a completely improvised Sherlock Holmes narrative show. Usually not a musical, although we have done shows where it just became a musical out of nowhere. We had a show at Fringe 2 years ago called Sherlock Holmes and the Virgin Train, and this was just after the Jeremy Corbyn scandal where he'd claimed there was no seats on the train, and then Virgin said there were seats and everything, so we got the title Sherlock Holmes and the Virgin Train, and we decided the whole show was going to be about this little orphan Jeremy Corbyn trying to get the train, but then there was all sorts of stuff. The train disappeared in the tunnels and all of these things going on. But in one of the scenes in the middle, completely unrelated to anything else, we came out, and I think it was me and one of the other guys, I can't remember who it was, just came out kind of going da 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 da, and then we started singing this song, this whole song called The Railway Boys. We're like, we're the Railway Boys, this gang of like West Side Story style gang working on the railway. And then we thought that was done, and then one of the guys goes, "Oh no, here comes the Welsh Railway Boys." So we came in and we did the whole thing again, but with really bad Welsh accents. And then we're like, right now, 8-part harmony with 4 people, so we're trying to do 2 characters each. So that's not a musical show, but it does drift into that. So what we do with that is we just get, again, title from the audience, much in the style of something like Ostentatious, where, get them to write it down, pop it in the hat. One of us comes on as Arthur Conan Doyle. We draw our titles out the hat, do a couple of This Is What You Could Have Seen, some of my other stories that are you might have remembered from reading the books, although obviously none of them are. We make that very clear when we're handing out the title suggestions. Don't put down Hound of the Baskervilles.
Did you used to get real
We
ones?
do, and even now, even telling people, we do very occasionally get ones in where it actually is The Sign of Four or Study in Scarlet or whatever. But you know, you get a lot which are plays on the actual titles, and then you get ones which are just completely off the wall as well. And then we do that during the Fringe. That's a kind of 50-minute show, but during the year we do that as a 90-minute show with an interval.
Cool.
So we've got a residency at the Monkey Barrel Comedy Club up in Edinburgh, which just opened December last year. So it's been open a year now, and Thursdays is now improv night, and week on week off we do an improvised Sherlock Holmes and an improvised Harry Potter with the title cards from the audience. But because they need to make money on bar sales, they don't want us to just do an hour-long show and then send everyone away. What we do is we do a 90-minute narrative in two halves, and we do then a kind of half-hour bonus set, so there can be a second interval. If people have enjoyed it, they stick around, they're getting kind of a free extra non-themed set, and we'll do maybe a living room or just a complete montage, whatever we feel in the mood for.
Cool.
We did once do an improvised Chuckle Vision, Chuckle Brothers, because the other two guys in the group as permanent members, and one of the people who regularly guests, they do this improvised Chuckle Vision show, and so they were like, well, why don't we just do that as our bonus set to an audience of 100 people, a lot of whom were foreign and had no idea what the Chuckle Brothers were.
Fair enough.
So,
it's
But yeah, we don't. We're all very familiar with the source material for both Sherlock Holmes and Harry Potter, but we're not religious about it. We do play fast and loose with it. We reference things which weren't invented, and then or make references to other things. You know, we did a whole one about two brothers running a pizza parlor called Mario and Luigi. So then throughout that, it's how many references to Super Mario Brothers can you get into it while still keeping it set in 1895. So
right.
you know,
yes.
And yeah, so we play very loosely with the source material, but we do try and call each other out if someone references something that hasn't been invented.
Yeah.
You know, if I said there was a show even where I said something about the wireless, and someone was like, "What's a wireless?" And that's where I go, "Oh god, what is a wireless?" And you know, it turned out it was a gramophone with an orphan inside just speaking through the pipe, singing songs at my request and things, you know. And then you've got the classic improv, if this is true, what else is true? So what other inventions can we reference and then justify? So we're taking a train out of London and saying, oh, free Wi-Fi on the train. And they're, what's Wi-Fi? It's like, oh, I've just got a bunch of orphans bringing me things. Photographs of cats running on and off the train at every station. So I think we have a lot of fun with it, but also if you're an actual Sherlock Holmes fan, we have people coming up and being like, oh, I absolutely loved it. Like keeping the kind of the character relationships and the little references and nods to the original books, which you get kind of the fans, the real kind of hardcore fans in the crowd. That's the point where you get the kind of the woo from the back of the room from 4 people who realise that character was from, you know, one of the short stories in the casebook of Sherlock Holmes or whatever.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's really interesting if you're doing something from another world. From Sherlock Holmes, Harry Potter, it's the debate of how much of Harry Potter or Sherlock Holmes do you put into your show. You know, because I think you need to do enough so it feels authentically in that world. But if you put too much, do you risk alienating the people that aren't experts in Harry Potter or Sherlock
Exactly,
Holmes?
yeah. I think it's about making it a completely accessible and entertaining show where someone who has never read or seen a single Sherlock Holmes adaptation can come in and still go away with a smile on their face saying, yeah, that was great. But if you can make those little kind of... I think it's kind of like if you watch kids' movies, you know, there's always a few jokes in there for the parents which are going to go completely over the kid's head. But so long as it's not all jokes that are beyond the kids, it's still going to be an enjoyable movie for the children. And I think it's the same for that. If you can do a show which is completely accessible but has a few jokes for the fans as well, a few little references or nods here or there, even just to things where, even if it's not a Sherlock Holmes themed thing, if you can have another kind of, you know, we've referenced the fact that there's fan fiction in a show. Like, John Watson has been writing Sherlock Holmes fan fiction during a show. And I was like, what is that? And he's like, oh, I'm just writing some stuff. And they're like, oh, is it going to be published? No, this one's just for me, you know, that sort of thing. And, you know, so then you've got, like, all of the, you know, the Tumblr girls in the crowd who are absolutely, you know, in love with Benedict Cumberbatch, and then they get a little nod to the fact that, you know, yes, we're doing this for you, and then gets the cheer, but without alienating the rest of the crowd.
So you're not only knowing about the Arthur Conan Doyle originals, you're also knowing about, you know, the TV and film adaptations.
Yeah.
But you're also knowing about the periphery thing around that.
The whole fandom. Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's something that myself and Will, who started it up, and we're kind of, you know, the creative directors as well as performing in the group, and we're responsible if it all goes tits up. It's our names on the partnership. So, but we said that we were like, right, we need to. We'd both read the books. Yes. We both watched the BBC show, and we're like, yeah, but we have to make sure that we are educating ourselves as much as possible on all of the extended universe, as it were, because Sherlock Holmes is the human character who has been portrayed on film more than any other.
Really?
Second most portrayals on film after Dracula, who's not human. But yeah, there's been literally hundreds of TV and film adaptations in different languages around the world, so we're never going to be able to watch all of them. No. But I think, you know, as long as you can, you know, watch some of the classic Jeremy Brett stuff, the BBC Sherlock adaptation, you know, you've got Elementary, the American one, which is their kind of modernized version of it as well as kind of having a peripheral awareness of the deeper fandom without delving into it too much. You could go mad going down that road.
And what is it that excites you and Will about, you know, taking an established property, whether it's Bond, Harry Potter, or Sherlock Holmes, and improvising in that world? What is so profitable about that?
I mean, it's profitable because it gets in people who wouldn't come to see improv shows, which has always been, I think, a challenge world over. Yeah. Unless you're in Chicago, you're not going to have people wandering in off the street to watch Joe Blogg's first improv show. So I think that was a big selling point for us, where we're like, right, we let's find a solid IP that we can work from and build our own thing, but which has this unique selling point.
Yes.
I say unique selling point, there's obviously various other improvised Sherlock Holmes shows, Harry Potter shows, James Bond shows. I think the year before we did Spontaneous Sherlock at the Fringe for the first time, there was no improvised Sherlock Holmes shows on the Edinburgh Fringe, and we were like, right, this is great. And then there was two the year that we did it. There was us and Adventures of the Improvised Sherlock Holmes, which is a bunch of the guys who do Racing Minds in Oxford. And then there was supposed to be a third one, which I think didn't make it to the actual festival in the end, but so initially we looked online and there was 3 improvised Sherlock Holmes shows going to the Fringe. But actually, they're very different. You know, like, I've guested with the Adventures of the Improvised Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did a show with them in Oxford, and it is a very different show, and theirs is kind of family friendly, and ours is a bit more late night, drunk crowds. We did a joint show with, you know, about 12 people on stage once, which was great fun, and they were saying exactly that. You know, it's a very different show, and we're performing at different times of day to different people. So the other thing that we really liked about kind of taking these existing established worlds is that you do have so much to draw from, which is, it's almost a crutch in a way. You know, you've got these at least two characters for Sherlock Holmes, and, you know, way more for Harry Potter, who are in every single story. And so you don't have to come on stage worrying about, oh, who am I going to be? Oh, what's our relationship? For what I was saying about the kind of structured, people say how much of the structure is planned. The only thing we ever plan for Sherlock is that the first scene will be something not related to Holmes and Watson, establishing the mystery.
Lovely.
You know, they see someone seeing a mysterious shadow, or someone being murdered, or whatever it is. And then scene 2 is Holmes and Watson, usually at Baker Street, You may have Mrs. Hudson coming in, they may have Lestrade visiting, but it's always those two.
Yeah.
And then beyond that point, nothing is planned. We also don't plan who plays Sherlock and Watson before going on stage.
Interesting.
We leave the hats on chairs on the stage, and then whoever grabs the hat, that's who's playing Sherlock for that day. We try and make sure it's a good balance and no one's playing it every single time, but we don't pre-plan any of that. So, but being able to go into that second scene, knowing who you are, what your relationship to your scene partner is, and generally where you are, because I say it's usually Baker Street, although occasionally it will be on the beach or down the pub, whatever. But usually, if in doubt, you've got that fallback location of where most of the mysteries start is with Holmes and Watson having a conversation in their flat at Baker Street, and there being a knock at the door.
Yes.
So that kind of gives you so much freedom to explore everything else and build your environment and play off each other and have fun straight away. You don't have to have the platform at the top of the show, because you know who you are, but the audience also knows who you are. You don't need to say, "Hello, Dr. John Watson, my assistant. We are here in our home on 221B Baker Street." We can walk on stage, sit down, one of us starts smoking a pipe, the other one starts flicking through a newspaper, and people know exactly who we are and what we're doing.
Yes.
So there's a lot of fun and freedom with that. I can't really speak to improvised Potter because I've not done it yet. Spontaneous Potter I'm officially directing it and a major part of it, and I'm on all of the posters and everything. But because it's in Edinburgh and it's on a Thursday night and I've got a job, I actually haven't been able to make it to any of the shows yet. But hopefully, in the coming year, I'm going to try and do a few, either take a couple of days off work or work remotely and go up on the train with my laptop and work throughout the day, do the show, come back down on the Friday. So, but it was one of those things where it's baffling that no one else was doing it in the UK already. Yeah. It's a bit of it's something that we tried a while back doing as part of a bigger show, not as its own standalone show, and it didn't really work. And I think it's because we were trying to make too many jokes for the Harry Potter fans in the crowd, and not making a show that was standalone funny on its own. It was relying too much on, oh, that guy's doing a funny voice because he's playing Snape, Yes. So I think from chatting to Will and Paul and the others about how the show's been going, it's been going really well, and they've managed to find that balance, which is really good. The other thing is that we pitch it as it's an improvised Harry Potter fan fiction, not an improvised Harry Potter novel. Ooh. So that gives you a lot more freedom to kind of break canon, as it were.
That's a lovely distinction, actually.
Yeah, and you can set it at any point in the schooling system. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to say, oh, well, is it first year or sixth year, what stage of Voldemort coming back to life is it, you can kind of just throw that out, and it's completely standalone stories featuring the characters from the Harry Potter books.
Oh, that's lovely.
And as the bonus set for that, rather than just doing a montage or whatever you might do, we have on our title suggestion cards, we also have on the flip side a scene that you'd like to see. Yeah. So we can just do a series of kind of standalone scenes out of the hat, and then one longer narrative as well from a title.
Do you weave those scenes into the longer narrative from the title?
They can be referenced back to, but they don't have to be, if that makes sense.
Right.
The way that if we're doing a Mammoth Coconut show, we'll maybe reference something in the musical that happened in the short form games the first half of the show before the interval, and that always gets a kind of a good laugh because people have forgotten about that, and then they remember it and go, oh, that was funny when that happened. So a lot of the laughs in improv, I think, are just calling back to stuff that's already happened. Yeah. And again, with narrative, tying up a narrative, that's what we always say for the show, is that don't do any plotting whatsoever.
Yeah.
Just play the scenes, do emotional stuff, do relationship stuff, play the game. We pimp each other really, really badly because we're comfortable, confident on stage, and then we teach classes and say, don't do what we do on stage. Not until you're in a group that's been performing together for 5+ years.
So what do you like to pimp other people into doing?
Oh,
what do they like doing?
Anything
to get you to do?
So we do a lot of stuff. I mean, lists are always fun. Like you say, like if Sherlock Holmes says, oh, I wrote a monograph on clouds, and you go, oh yeah, just list me 11 types of clouds. and then you can do that, and then you can later in the show be like, oh, sorry, remind me what the 11 clouds that you said earlier were, and try and get into this, because making up 11 names of clouds not too difficult. Remembering a list of 11 made-up clouds that you did half an hour ago, that's difficult. And if they can pull it off,
Yeah.
you get a massive round of applause. And that's what we always say about pimping, is that you're not trying to catch the other person out, you're trying to make them look good.
Yes.
You know, you're introducing this air of instability, and then when they pull it off, it makes them look like an absolute hero. So, you know, I've been pimped in shows to do Shakespearean sonnet in iambic pentameter. Reading our fun one's always, you know, read the family motto in Latin, please. And then, but then you can always fire that back and you say, oh no, I tell you what, your Latin's better than mine. You read it in Latin, I'll translate it into English. And then again, it looks like the person with the Latin has the harder job, but actually translating it's harder. So things like that. We pimp each other to do songs, obviously, because we've got a musician and occasionally it is a musical. And yeah, poems. I say Will is a freestyle rapper. He gigs as an improv comedy rapper.
Yes, I did his workshop at the Birmingham Improv Festival.
How did you find it?
It was hilarious.
So I lived with Will for 2 years, and it gets old very quickly. I jest, of course, no, but it is. Living with Will is like you go into his bedroom and he has a whiteboard on his wall, and it's just words that rhyme with each other that he's written. He'll write down a polysyllabic word and then write as many words and phrases as he can that rhyme with that. And so he does just have that on his wall, and he has notebooks and notebooks and notebooks where he just writes down things that rhyme with each other.
Yeah.
He sits and he'll spend hours and hours trying to find the right beat to go under it and things like that. So he's dedicated to it. But I lived with him for about 6 months, and this was before he was doing it properly, and we were both kind of saying like, oh, we should get into this. We should try doing like improv freestyle rap. So we would just like have like rap battles in the flat, and neither of us were very good. But then I moved abroad for a year, came back having done no rapping at all, with no ability to rap. Anything that I had, any talent I'd gained was gone, and he'd been doing it non-stop for 12 months and went, do you want to do a show together? And I said, no, you can do that as a solo show. And I think he's probably better off for it. But yeah, if I can pimp him in a show to do a rap, then that always, again, because if people don't know that he's a freestyle rapper, it looks like he's in this real Jeopardy hotspot, you know, but actually he's in his element doing it. So so we really do kind of put each other on the line. Another thing that we really like to do is having like masses of characters in one scene when there's only 3 or 4 actors on stage. So we'll be like, oh, there's 15 men waiting at the door to see you, and then 2 people have to do a line of 15 characters. And again, if we can call that back later in the show and be like, oh, those same 15 men are back, and have, you know, people running in. To the point that Fringe, not this year, but 2016, we had this recurring character in Sherlock, in our spontaneous Sherlock show called Jeremy Hatface. And it was just one of us would come on with a bowler hat over our face. And any time there was like a run of characters, one of them would be Jeremy Hatface, and then very occasionally he would just turn up as a character in random scenes in shows, and it didn't make sense to anyone unless they'd come to see a show and came back. And so it got to the point at the end of our 3-week run where someone would come on as Jeremy Hatface, and there would be about 15, 20 people in the crowd going, yeah, woo! Because they'd seen so many of the shows that they'd picked up on this recurring character who doesn't exist in the Sherlock Holmes canon. He's just a guy with a bowler hat on his face. So that's the kind of thing I get in, where I think that's fine as long as it's not it's seasoning. It's not the meat of the dish, it's the seasoning. So so long as you're sprinkling that over the top of a solid narrative with good relationship stuff and callbacks and things, then that's fine. But if that becomes the bulk of the show, that's the couple of times I've come off stage and gone, I wasn't too happy with that, is because we were getting too caught up with all of that kind of patting yourself on the back, you know, type of it's for the performers, not for the audience at that point, and it's so you have to be careful that you're towing that line.
No, it's because performing with Bryn in Dr. Tuprov, I'm very much the one for the deep cut. Yeah. And Bryn's always going, I'm not so sure. Oh, I know, but you know, those that have heard of Philip Hinchcliffe will really enjoy it. And like Bryn's going, well, realistically, how many is that going to be? Can I just do it if Chris Mead is there? Okay, if Chris Mead is there, then you can do it, and that's fine. But otherwise, So now I'm smuggling in the Easter eggs so that they make sense in the context of what we're doing, but they happen to be a line that was used. So if you're a fan, you get the reference. If you're not a fan, it's just something a character.
Yeah, you can't shoehorn it in, but if it comes up naturally,
Yeah.
that's there's going to be someone in the audience who their day was made with that one reference. You know, so. I think that's it. I mean, you find in Sherlock Holmes even just, and probably for Doctor Who as well, just referencing the title of an episode or a mystery that gets a laugh out of a small quarter of the audience who were generally sitting in the dark at the back because they don't usually leave the house. But, yeah,
those are my people.
Yeah, mine too. Don't worry. But I mean, I think most improvisers are kind of are geeky about something in that way, and it's just finding other people who have the same weird obsessions that you do, and so you can do a show together. But I think what I started saying and got off a massive tangent there was that we never plot, we introduce as much stuff as possible, and in the last maybe 10 minutes of the show we tie all of those strings together, and even if at that point it's really forced or a real stretch to make that make sense, that gets a massive round of applause from the audience because it looks like magic.
Yes.
It looks like you've made all of these unrelated things tie together, and I think it's what people like about doing the Herald, which I don't particularly like, going back to the thing about not enjoying structure. I find the Herald far too structured for me, so I much prefer to do a more free format. But I think a lot of people like the Herald is because you do that kind of gradually bringing things together, and then if you can manage to make everything make sense in that final scene, then that looks like you've done the impossible.
I don't like the Herald because my head is not very big and I can't hold that many things in it at the same time and listen to the other person and engage emotionally.
Yes,
and
find the game of the scene. And
yes.
I agree with you on that. I do think it's Harold done well looks amazing.
Yeah.
But I'd say 90% of Harolds are not done well, if that makes sense. And I think the only reason we really do it here is because they do it in America, and that's my other issue with the Herald, is that the only reason that is the go-to long-form format is because that's what Americans do.
Yes.
I'm sure I've just outraged half of your listeners with that statement, but
outrage is our business.
Yeah, but I fully respect anyone's decision to enjoy the Herald.
Oh, yeah.
If you like the Herald, go for it. If you want to run a Herald night, absolutely go for it. I think that
don't. I'm saying don't.
There's not.
Just don't do it. This is Stuart talking. Don't do it. They're awful. They're not all awful.
But yeah, but I don't enjoy Heralds, and I don't know why it's everyone's go-to thing, and I think it's also thrust on people too early in the improv learning process. I think it tends to be, long form 101. Yeah, let's learn the Herald as the first format that you've ever done as a long form, and actually it puts a lot of people off long form improv. So a lot of people think they don't like long form because all they've done is a Herald, and they didn't like it, or because the other end they've been thrust into a completely free form narrative structure, and they couldn't do it. But I think there's so many nice long form formats that we should be teaching people. A living room is my favourite.
Yeah,
absolutely. I love the living room. I love the La Ronde. Where every scene one character is the same person from the last scene and one is a new character.
Yes.
So every scene has a relation. It's based on the La Ronde, the classic French play, which was then made into the Blue Room on the West End. But yeah, so it's this idea of it's always one character from the last scene.
Yes.
So you can see them in a completely new circumstance, and sometimes. You'll have two very similar scenes back to back, but then you also have the lovely thing of this guy who's a complete alpha male boss at work comes home and is actually miserable at home, or is actually really introverted and has been really worried about how long he can keep it up and things like that. So that's why I like the La Ronde.
We should perhaps explain the living room format.
Yes, so the living room, so you've got chairs on the stage. Anytime you're sitting down, you are yourself. You're not a character. You're having a genuine discussion with your fellow improvisers about your real life. You're not making up stories. You're genuinely talking. But at any point, something in that discussion inspires you. You stand up and you do a scene on the other side of the stage. So if you're sitting down, you're yourself. If you're standing up, you're a character. That's nice because you can kind of always fall back if you're kind of like, okay, this has run itself dry. You don't have to come up with anything new. You can just sit down and start chatting again.
And I love the I love any format which involves sitting down. That's, it's my second favourite thing to do. Lying down is the best, but you don't get to be seen quite as well for that. But also the way in which, if you're sitting down and there's a scene going on, you can edit it just by talking.
Yes,
and I just think that's really
absolutely
seamless. And I love that.
Well, do you know the French edit?
Yes.
Yeah. So like, if you can, I almost never do it because I always forget it's an option.
I should pretend I don't.
Yeah. So the French edit in a scene where if you've got two people on stage, two more people can walk on from the back, starting up a new conversation, and walk between the two people on the stage like they're opening up French windows, French doors, out into the garden. And then those two people who are in the scene peel off, and then the people who've walked in from the back are in their new scene now. So that's nice, and that kind of like seamless thing. But it's so much easier if you're doing a living room and you're just sitting down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done a lot of two-prov, which you were saying you're doing with Bryn, and yeah, that's always tougher finding formats that work for that because you're limited by you have to be able to edit from within a scene.
Yes.
Anything that requires tag outs is challenging if there's only two of you. Or you can sweep the stage from inside a scene, but yeah,
seems inelegant somehow.
Yeah, so we used a two-person La Ronde, which is called the zipper, because it's like you've got the teeth of a zip where you've got one, and then every time you're switching, you're still in the scene, but one of you's a new character and the other one's the same. It gets very confusing for the people performing that one as well. Pretty Flower, do you know the Pretty Flower format?
No, I'm going to pretend I don't, for the benefit of the listener.
The Pretty Flower, another one that I quite like the living room, where you can kind of dive in and out of scenes because you've got one central scene, which is the head of the flower, and then you cut away to do a new scene, and then you cut back to that central scene, and that's the petal of the flower.
Right.
So you're doing you're cutting away and doing related or unrelated scenes, but inspired by what's happening in this central scene.
Yes.
But you've always got that. That's the backbone of your show.
Right.
Is that if you've ever done you've just done a tag run, and then you're like, okay, this has run itself out. You cut back to that original scene.
Yes.
And that scene doesn't have to be funny. It just has to kind of keep going, and that's what's holding it all together.
So, how is that different from a deconstruction?
Because you're generally in a Pretty Flower, it would usually just be one cutaway scene and then back, cutaway scene back, cutaway scene back.
Whereas with a deconstruction, you have a base scene, and then you have maybe 3 scenes.
Yes.
And then you go back to the base scene.
Yeah, and so the Pretty Flower really is. It's like you're drawing a flower with your cutaway scene is the petal, and then you cut back, and that's the other side of the petal. So it's like a kid drawing a flower with those big triangles around a circle, and it's nice because it's just that kind of, you've got that, and again in deconstruction as well, you've got that backbone to kind of fall back on. That's your safety net if you're thinking, right, this isn't going as well as I would like it to go, or this is hit a peak, and if we try and keep going with this, it's just gonna flatline.
Yeah.
You've got that to fall back on. So
cool.
Yeah.
So what format are you doing with Other People's Children?
Other People's Children, we are doing a relatively free-form narrative based off a regret from the audience.
Ooh, a regret?
Yes.
That's interesting.
So we come to the audience and we ask them for if anyone has something that they regret, or a point in their life where they wonder how it would have gone differently if they'd made a different decision. And then we start from that, and then we kind of run with it. When we started out doing it, we were very kind of quite rigidly keeping to, like, let's take this person's life and see how it would have been different. But we found that was limiting us too much. So really, we're just using it as a diving platform, as a jumping off point. So we take that regret, and then we run with that and continue and see that snowball out of control, or we see how it might have been different if their life might have been different if they'd made a different decision. And people are really, people are more willing to give, like, proper serious regrets than we expected. We expected a lot of, and we do get a lot of ones where it's people saying, like, oh, I studied ancient Greek at school, I wish I'd studied German instead. Yeah. And, you can have a lot of fun with that. So we did a 20-minute narrative of that where I was going to Germany, and I was like, oh, yeah, thank God I studied German at school, but then actually everyone in Germany just wanted to speak Greek instead. But then we've had some, yeah, I mean, these are things that people have shared. I know this one did come from an improviser in London who said that she wet herself in a lift in Paris when she was 16 and then told her boyfriend that she'd had a miscarriage. I won't name who that was that said that, but she shared that at a show. And yeah, it's like, so people are willing to divulge these really personal things, and then we make light of it on stage.
Yeah, I really enjoy it when you're taking real experiences from the audience and then playing them on stage, because that's a real treat for the person that had that experience.
Yes, this is really why we decided to do it, because I was thinking it's incredibly personal to that person, and that it's their show effectively.
Yes.
But by taking that and just having it as a suggestion, you still have the complete freedom to do whatever you want with it.
Yes.
I think it was something that I had been really running through my mind, trying to think what I wanted to take in that vein. Because I think I think it was Classic Andy did it, where they asked for a location that you'd walked past but never been into and wondered what was inside.
Ooh, that's
so
really
I think
nice.
it was Classic Andy. If it wasn't Classic Andy, I apologise to whoever it was. But yeah, and again, it's the same thing where it's personal to that one person who gave that suggestion.
Yes.
Of, you know, this weird boarded up building next to the newsagents in their childhood home, whatever it was. But because it was somewhere that they'd never been into, they could do whatever they want inside that location. And the person's not going to say, but that's not how it went.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with the regret. You know, they say if you regret doing something, then we can do a scene where the person doesn't do that, and then we see actually their life, they end up, you know, addicted to heroin in the gutter, and be like, well, maybe it was for the best that you decided to do that. You know, it's something that we can take that is personal to that person, but it doesn't limit us where you have to follow their life or follow their exact idea of how it would be in their head.
And it's interesting if you are the person that shared that, because you do get a perspective. And it, you know, however, not necessarily it's going to be a psychologically real perspective, but it's interesting getting another perspective on your life. You know, with how much you learn from that, I'm not sure. But it's interesting how I'm really interested in the art of getting suggestions from the audience, and I'm a big fan of getting written suggestions, because that enables people, the sort of people who aren't confident to shout stuff out, to get involved.
Absolutely.
And to have more complex things, because if you've got a complex idea which is got nuances, it's much easier to write it down than it is to shout it out. Yeah,
getting people to shout stuff out as well, I think it does. You're going to have, across an hour show, you're going to have, you know, maybe 5 people shouting out suggestions, and consistently for everything it's going to be the same 5 people. Whereas if you're getting them to write it down, every single person has an equal chance to get their voice heard, their idea used, which is what we do with Sherlock and Potter. And then I say for Coconuts, what we do is we'll get a handful of suggestions and then get people to cheer for the one that they like the best. And then again, so you know, there's, rather than just getting this one suggestion. Or the other thing, which I always feel really awkward sitting in the audience at an improv show, which is where, you know, an improv group will get a suggestion and then they'll kind of go, anything else? Anything else?
Yes.
No, any more? Any advance on that? And it's like, and I know that it's just that they do want to get as many people shouting out as possible, but it does, for me as an audience member, as opposed to me as an improviser, there is that little bit of, oh, was my idea not good? You know? And then I'm not going to say anything again after that point. So I think by getting a few things and then voting, or by getting people to write things down, always you're going to get more of a more varied show and a more interesting show, I think, as well. So
yes, when you've taken one suggestion, see, I'm not wedded to the idea that you absolutely need to take the first suggestion.
Not at all. I don't think, but I think there has to be tactfully done to ask for further suggestions, and I think even if that's just at the top of the show saying, we're going to get multiple suggestions for everyone, so shout them all out. The problem is when it's in that moment of that first suggestion and you say, can I get a location? And someone says, IKEA. Like, okay, I heard IKEA. Anything else? And again, as I say, it is getting multiple suggestions and not just going for the first one, which I think is absolutely fine, but you need to do it tactfully. I think that it has to be done in a way that's clear to the audience, that it's not, their suggestions aren't being judged and they aren't being filtered or censored in any way. It's just a case of, you know, you have to find a way to do it that that is respectful to your audience and keeps them on your side.
Yeah, if I'm watching a group do that, I want to know I'm in safe hands.
Yes.
I don't want to be worrying about the people doing the improv, and if they can't confidently get 2 or 3 suggestions, I'm like, oh, are they going to be all right? And then I'm worried about them, and then I can't enjoy it.
Yeah. No, I think the same. Even when people kind of people seen them discuss on stage whether they think it's a suitable suggestion, I'm like, oh, someone just commit, please. Just start the scene now. You heard a bunch of things. Just say, I'm going to take this. Don't say, oh, what did you like? Which one did you want to go for? Because again, it's the same thing of kind of like it's picking it apart, and then that person who shouted it out is sitting there going, oh well, no one wanted to go for my asparagus suggestion or whatever.
Yes, I would much rather they get a suggestion and then someone immediately walks forward and just starts something.
Yes.
Because then I'm like, oh.
The other thing with written suggestions is that you can kind of filter out anything that is massively, massively offensive, which... although, because it's anonymous, it also invites more offensive suggestions, perhaps, because I think certainly doing a late night show, I mean, we've had some very... I mean, we will... Generally, if we're picking out things and someone's written something which uses a racial slur, for example, which we've had very rarely. I will say that, if we're doing shows to, between 100 and 250 people, and we've had a handful of these across 3 years of doing it, but I mean, we can just say, oh, that one's blank, chuck it away, or I can't read the handwriting, or occasionally I will just pull one out and go, oh wow, that's racist, I'm not going to say that. But the thing is, because it's not coming from them who shouted it out, that person's not sitting there like with their head up in their jumper, crying because they've been called out from the stage, because no one knows it was them.
Yes.
They know it was them. And they feel guilty now, but they should. So.
Well, yes, sometimes they may not actually be racist, but they're trying
very hard to be funny, and
don't do that.
And people say it when I'm going down the queue handing out pieces of paper and pens, and people will say like, oh, is there an age limit on the show? And I'm like, no, but I'll tell you now, if you write down something which you think should have an age limit, chances are it will be a less entertaining show. It's like, I'll try and discourage people. But we've done it, there's always ways around it as well. We had a show where it was Sherlock Holmes and the Drunken Slut, and we were like, we don't really want to get into, slut-shaming territory, and particularly because...
Let's not slam those shuts.
It was slam those shuts. Slam that door shut. But we didn't, particularly when you are a group which is all or predominantly male, you have to be very, very sensitive about that sort of thing. So what we had was Will came on stage and said, oh, I love being an undertaker in South London, a South London undertaker, SLUC, slut. And from that, there we go, scene 1, it was very, ham-fisted, but we made it very clear, in this universe, this is what slut means. In 1895 London, it is an acronym for a South London undertaker, and we never have to reference the fact it's a woman of loose morals. Like,
hooray!
And that's it, and it's just about doing that in a way that, is still funny, and people can be like, laugh at being like, oh, I see what he did there.
Because nobody really wants to see.
No one wants to see an hour-long show of discussions, of morality discussions over, whether. And the other thing there is, I think, women and men should be equally allowed to have multiple partners. That's fine. But in 1895, would Sherlock Holmes have thought that? And how do you make it clear that it's your character who has that opinion and not you as an improviser that has that opinion? And it's a touchy subject often with that, and we've had it, if you've got characters in the show who are gay, again, we are, it's a mostly straight cast who have to be very careful that the fact that 2 characters are gay is not a punchline.
Yes.
It is completely, it's non-essential. It's a non-issue. It's just happenstance because people are gay,
Yes.
And you're playing these gay characters as if they were any other character, and you're not playing them as a caricature or stereotype. So I think that it's something that's a delicate issues, and again, it's 1895. People would look down on it, but you have to make sure that the people who do look down on it are the bad guys.
Right? Yes.
And make it abundantly clear that Sherlock Holmes is a forward-thinking man living in the wrong age. So, yeah, I think it's, we get suggestions which make you go, oh, God, what are we going to do with this? But there's always a way to handle it, unless it's a racial slur or a homophobic slur or a gendered slur. I think generally you can get away with pretty much... We did a show which was Sherlock Holmes and the Seven-Headed Dildo Monster, But then one of the best shows we've ever done was Sherlock Holmes and the Policeman. Like, it's you can never tell what's going to be a good or a bad show from the title. So
well, yeah, and what you want is, in many ways, a kind of a low-level title or a kind of a sort of quite bland title that gives you room to build. But if you've already had the punchline of, we've got a seven-headed dildo, it's like it's hard to heighten that. Yes. Perhaps for the best. Yes.
I can't remember how that show worked out, to be honest. We've done enough of them now that this is the thing that we find as well, is because so many people come to see the shows during the Fringe. We'll have people come up to us and say, I saw you at Fringe 2 years ago. It was called Sherlock Holmes and the blah blah blah. Yeah. Do you remember that one? And we have to say, honestly, no, because you saw one show which probably wasn't our best one. And we remember maybe 2 shows from that run of 25. And we've done another couple of hundred since then. So,
but how lovely
it's
to
the
them.
Nicest thing is people coming up and saying, I saw this show and it was the funniest thing I've ever seen, particularly when it's one that we didn't think was very good, which happens, We've come off stage from a show going, oh, that was terrible, oh, that was, not definitely one of our weakest we've ever done, and we've had people come up in the street 2 weeks later and say, I saw that show and it's the funniest thing I saw all month, and it's like, great, like that. You're always going to be your own worst critic, I suppose. I think for all improvisers and probably all performers and artists of any description, that's going to be the case, is that you are watching the scene from the inside, not the outside, so it's very difficult to be subjective about it.
Yeah.
To be objective about it, rather, you're by definition, you're subjective about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes what we see as mistakes are the bits of the show that made the other performers and the audience laugh the most.
Yes.
We had a scene in one of the shows this Fringe where Paul was playing Queen Victoria and I came on as Mycroft Holmes to speak to her, and she thought I was the Prime Minister. By which I mean Paul, as an improviser, thought I was the Prime Minister and said Prime Minister, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Your Majesty, you must have misheard me, Mycroft Holmes." And rather than kind of starting into this big argument on stage, he just goes. He goes, I'm the fucking Queen. My face is on the coins. Don't you dare talk back to me. And he came off stage and he's like, I'm so sorry I blocked you in that scene. I was like, no, that was the funniest part of the whole show. My parents were in the crowd for that one and they came away going saying that was the funniest thing that they'd of any of the shows that they've seen me do. That was their favourite moment, was Paul just going off on this massive rant as Queen Victoria. And but he'd come off stage going oh, I'm really sorry, I felt like I negated you there, and I was like, no, that was amazing. It was such a good character choice that it just absolutely worked. So I think it's, don't know what we're talking about there.
That's improv. Cool. Right, okay, so the big final question is, what is your signature move? What is the classic move that you do? You save the day. They go, oh, classic Sam.
That's so funny. We always talk about this in Edinburgh. In the Edinburgh scene, we'd always talk about improv bingo, because everyone has their things that they do on stage, and you can watch a show and go, yeah, okay. I think my classic things that I will just fall into doing on stage are, I'll very often play an old man. That's my go-to thing, is playing an old man.
Yeah.
And if I don't know what else to do in a scene, I'll come in as an old man. To the extent that I now do a solo improvised character concept piece called Buckley, who's this 60-something alcoholic who invented the USB. And so so that's probably one of my absolute go-to things. Another one I'll do is I'll come on, if I feel like I need to add information in a scene, I'll come on, just say it, and then rather than organically leaving, I'll just go, bye, and walk off. So I'll come in and be like, oh, sorry, Sherlock, this letter came from you. I completely forgot to give it to you. I already opened it and read it. This is what it says. Bye, and then just walk away. So that's probably a kind of a very cliche thing that I'll do.
That's a really fun thing, though.
Oh, it's so much fun to do. Or if someone's completely forgotten a major plot point from earlier, I'll come on even like as a ghost and be like, it's me, your father. Don't forget that key that you found. Bye. Walk away. Yeah. So
And the audience loves that sort of information.
oh, absolutely.
And it's like,
because something I always say is the audience likes to think they're cleverer than you. So it's why naive games and short form shows work so well, is because when the audience remembers something and you've forgotten it on stage and then someone reminds it on stage, they think it's great because they're like, I remembered that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it kind of validates them a little bit as well. So coming on and doing that, it's a way, because particularly if you've got 5 minutes left to wrap up a hour and a half narrative and you're like, oh my god, nothing makes sense at this point, and then you come on and be like, remember you smelt sulphur in the basement, maybe that has something to do with it, and then just kind of writing yourself immediately out of the scene and never referencing it again is always good fun.
And the audience doesn't care. It's like, oh, we've remembered that thing, we'll
Yeah.
deal with it now. It doesn't matter if it's been brought on by, you know.
And it's always nice if you can do it as a character who was in earlier and be like,
Yes.
burst through the door and be like, you thought I was dead. But sometimes you do just have to come in as a completely unnamed, unspoken of, never referenced character. Or, you know, nameless henchman, or, you know, in Sherlock Holmes often it's an orphan, you know, Baker Street Irregular is one of his network of homeless children who just comes in and says, oh, Mr. Holmes, this telegraph came for you and I completely forgot to give it to you. There's always that way to kind of work in the extra information. So that's probably one of my absolute signature moves, is come in as a completely unrelated character, give a crucial piece of plot information, and then just say bye and walk away.
Well, I invite everybody to adopt that signature move.
Yeah,
as their own.
absolutely.
Learn from you.
Share the love. If you ever need to add information to a scene, there's proper improv ways of doing it, but I just walk in and say bye and walk away and never reference it again.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I've had a very nice time.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic.
I made this.
That's improv!